You are looking at the last images of a teenager in Argentina. It was around 10:30 at night when she was captured entering the home in the company of a man. That would be the last time she would be seen alive. In the following days, her disappearance mobilized an entire country, and soon her desperate search ended up being an investigation full of contradictions, delays, and suspicions. But above all, with a very important question to answer. Who killed Agostina, and why? If you want to know all the details, stay with me until the end of the video. Hello everyone, how are you? My name is Lesma, I hope you are doing very well. As always, I am very happy to be here with you for another day. I am very grateful that you are watching me wherever you are. Today we have a case that happened in Argentina, that of Agostina Vega. Join me to see all the details. In addition, it was also known that Agostina wanted to be a psychologist when she grew up and loved spending a lot of time with her younger brother. And as Agostina's life went on, Melissa, her mother, also decided at a certain point to move on with her love life. She had an on and off relationship of about 3 years with a man who is going to be key in this case. This man's name is Claudio Gabriel Barelier. He is the son of a woman named Viviana Brizuela, and it is also known that at the time of the events he had a minor daughter, and was known for his relationship with several violent groups in the local soccer scene. Although he and Melissa were breaking up for a long time, they remained friends during those separations, to the point that he continued to be very present in the woman's family environment, maintaining frequent contact with various people close to her, including Agostina herself. By 2026, it is believed that this man was still in a relationship with Melissa, but he also had another partner, a woman named Soledad. In the end, Claudio lived with this woman and his daughter in a spacious property located in a residential neighborhood of the city. His mother also resided on the same land. Knowing all this context, we can get to May 23, 2026, when the events that bring us to this video began. That day, Agostina spent time with her mother, her younger brother, and Claudio at some fields where amateur soccer matches were being played. In the end, it was a normal afternoon, people who knew each other and supposedly had some affection for each other spending time together and, well, getting ready a bit for the week's activities again. After the games, they went home. Everyone went their own way, and the afternoon continued very normally. It wasn't until 10:30 at night that Agostina decided she would leave her house. She let her grandmother know she was going out and that she would go to a food place her grandfather had quite close by. When the woman questioned Agostina about the reason for her leaving so late, she simply said she was going to pick up a surprise for her mom and wouldn't be long. What should have been a routine outing to a place Agostina had already been to hundreds of times ended up being the start of one of the cases that has most impacted Argentina so far this year. And the thing is, Agostina never returned home. The hours began to pass and she wasn't answering messages or calls. Quickly, her family, having no news of her, began to contact friends, but no one knew where the young girl was. In addition to that, they decided to go out on their own to search the neighborhood. They thought that maybe Agostina had run into someone she knew, it had gotten late and she hadn't realized the time or the calls. But unfortunately, these searches yielded no results. It was around more or less 1 in the morning, when she still had no news, that Melissa wrote Claudio a message asking if he knew anything about her daughter. He explained that Agostina had asked him for help to meet up with a supposed little boyfriend, but that he couldn't drive her because he had no way to. Later, around 5 in the morning, Melissa wrote to the man again, and this time he told her something else. He said that the girl had gotten into a red car, but he couldn't give more details about the vehicle in question. At the same time, Gabriel was informed of the news of his daughter's disappearance. He was in another province with his wife and a group of friends and instantly went into a nervous breakdown. Desperate, he tried to return to Cordoba immediately. However, the people accompanying him insisted that he not hit the road in that state. Hours later, now calmer, he set off on the return trip and arrived in the city to find out what had happened to his daughter. Realizing that Agostina wasn't answering calls and messages, and that no one close to her knew exactly where she was, the family decided to file a formal report for her disappearance. Although many people already knew that Agostina hadn't returned home, they hadn't gone directly to the police to ask for institutional support. But in the end, upon arrival, they encountered a series of complications. The day they reported the disappearance was a Sunday. This meant that there was already less staff at the police station. In addition to that, the next day was a national holiday, and that Sunday, a supposedly very important soccer match was being played. So it seemed that the officers at the station didn't have much desire to do their job. This obviously raised a lot of criticism. It seemed that these people didn't want to look for Agostina, even though in the end that was their duty and obligation. The family didn't sit idly by waiting for all that bureaucracy and began to post the young girl's photo on social media. They started sharing it in groups and also through different messages. This caused more and more people to see Agostina's face, and the search was no longer just in Cordoba, but the whole country found out about what was happening. Little by little, different pieces of information began to arrive, which at a certain point were determined to be false. But then a very important one did arrive, from a taxi driver named Ariel. The taxi driver said that the night Agostina had disappeared, he had taken the girl from her house to another point. The taxi driver commented that he thought it was very late for such a young girl to be moving alone in a taxi and began to ask her different questions. She told him who her family was. He knew them more or less by sight, so that reassured him a bit more. And in addition to that, he said she was going to pick up a surprise for her mom's birthday. All this talk, how Agostina expressed herself, and all this kind of thing, reassured Ariel quite a bit. But what left him with a lot of doubt was that she never gave him an exact address to take her to, but rather she was giving him directions, almost from memory. In addition to that, when they arrived at the destination, Agostina told him to wait, that a person would come who would be the one to pay for the ride. Almost instantly, a man approached the car, and he was indeed the one who paid Ariel for the ride. Agostina got out, and she left with the man.
Bueno, ahí yo le dije, ahí había una persona lo que me estaba esperando ahí.
According to the taxi driver's account, the man avoided showing his face completely. He stood sideways next to the window. It gave him the impression then that he wanted to try to hide his face. Despite everything, Ariel managed to describe him.
¿Y cómo era el hombre? Me dicen. Bueno, ya ahí yo le describo más o menos cómo era la persona.
He remembered that he was about 6 feet tall, thin, and wore a black hooded jacket. He even specified that he had a certain resemblance to a player on the national soccer team.
Y yo le digo que tiene unos rasgos al jugador de fútbol, a De Paul.
Hearing these words, Agostina's mother reacted immediately. She already knew who they were talking about. The woman burst into tears almost instantly. And that's because the man Agostina had met was none other than Claudio. That was how, before the end of the day on Sunday, she expanded the police report, providing Claudio's name and the information supplied by the taxi driver. It is worth noting that there is also an audio recording of Agostina talking to her friends, telling them that she has to go with her mom's boyfriend to get a surprise for her.
No sé por qué tengo que ir con el novio de mamá para hacer una sorpresa a mi mamá. Me tengo que escapar.
As the hours went by, Monday, May 25th arrived, and to the frustration Agostina's family felt from not knowing anything about her, another frustration had to be added. The authorities were not supporting them as they should. The Minister of Social Security had been at the game the day before and participated in a police operation for the players' victory parade. In various news reports, obviously this was talked about because it turned out to be something very important, but in none of them did they refer to the search for Agostina. The family criticized this harshly, adding that it seemed people cared more about a soccer game than the disappearance of a minor. In addition to that, the police were also participating in the celebrations. They were trying to contain all this supposed joy over winning a soccer game and weren't helping the family, weren't making the case visible, and weren't going out to look for the girl either. By this time, Claudio was already in Cordoba and was participating in the searches that the family itself was obviously organizing. He began to investigate on his own, and came across the name Claudio. He didn't know this man, knew nothing about him, and had never heard of this guy.
Llegué a Córdoba, empecé a investigar quién era el tipo este, el supuesto Claudio, porque no tenía ningún dato.
But he decided to start digging deeper and deeper. After all, it seemed he was the last person who had spoken to his daughter before she disappeared. What Agostina's father did was record a phone conversation he had with Claudio. This was on the recommendation of the legal team he had at the time. During the conversation, Agostina's father could see that Claudio was contradicting himself. In addition to that, he also found the tone the man used very strange, the words he used, how he tried to express himself. In the end, it seemed to him that he was trying to justify himself at all times.
Hice una entrevista con el tipo, hay una grabación, una prueba de todas las cosas que él dice, y la verdad que son bastante duras.
During that same day, the authorities finally showed up at Claudio's home. He, for his part, denied any connection to Agostina's disappearance. However, that first intervention would also be highly questioned, because as it turned out, during the visit they did not perform any forensics, nor did they conduct an exhaustive search inside the home. Thus, the hours kept passing, and there was no trace of Agostina, and public concern and pressure around the case grew more and more. Despite all this, it wasn't until the afternoon of Wednesday, May 27th, that the Sofia Alert was finally activated, the national protocol in Argentina designed for urgent cases of missing minors at risk. 3 to 4 days had already passed without any news of Agostina. It already seemed like this was very late. Several women's rights organizations publicly questioned this delay. And in addition to that, it also caused a bit of confusion because some media outlets claimed that the alert was already active, while national sources assured that the formal request had not even been made yet. By that time, the investigation, which was moving slowly, was focused on Claudio. He was the last person to have seen Agostina alive. He had fallen into various contradictions, and Melissa, the teenager's mother, said that on the day of the disappearance, her daughter for some reason asked for Claudio's phone number, and she gave it to her. So because of this, they were having some conversation, which is why, in the end, he was already in the eye of the storm. The police began to investigate more and more, and decided to arrest him, but they could only arrest him for the crime of unlawful deprivation of liberty. By that time, nothing more was known about Agostina, and the hypothesis was that Claudio had handed her over to someone else. According to what Ariel had said, he had seen Claudio and Agostina enter the house together, although at that point he still denied it. Mind you, a very important piece of evidence would soon appear in the case, which would obviously make people realize that Claudio was still lying. And that is because investigators obtained a security camera recording. It confirmed part of the account of Ariel, the taxi driver. In the images, a teenager could be seen entering a home located a few blocks from where the ride had ended. It was Claudio's house. The detail was shocking because they watched the cameras for hours, and there was no record showing Agostina leaving there. Faced with this new evidence, the man decided to testify again, and for more than 2 hours he spoke before the prosecutor assigned to the case. On this new occasion, he denied having lied and maintained part of his initial version. He said that Agostina had not entered his house, and on the contrary, defended himself by claiming that the girl appearing in the images was his 11-year-old daughter. As support, he presented some screenshots of conversations he had had with Melissa. At that point, he did acknowledge that Agostina had contacted him and had asked him for taxi money. He then maintained the first version he had given Melissa, that the girl had left immediately to meet a supposed boyfriend, just as could be heard in an audio that would be released later. This time, however, Claudio asserted that Melissa was aware of everything that was happening.
No sé por qué tengo que ir con el novio de mamá para hacer una sorpresa a mi mamá. Me tengo que escapar.
But his explanation didn't convince those who knew Agostina. as family and friends claimed to perfectly recognize her way of walking and moving, and they knew it was her in those security images. In addition, many people also said that the teenager in the footage didn't look 11, but a bit older, so in the end, she couldn't be Claudio's daughter. As the hours went by, other details began to emerge that would make Claudio's figure even more disturbing. It turned out he had a prior criminal record for unlawful deprivation of liberty in a context of gender violence. According to authorities, he had been detained for 20 days in May 2025 and released on bail under several conditions, including appearing monthly before the prosecutor's office, which he did until May 2026. During that process, Claudio implied that it was all a plot against him, and many people believed him. We have to pause here and mention that Claudio was a municipal employee, and when he was arrested by authorities, he was obviously suspended from his post. But on that first occasion, things didn't go that way. Many co-workers, friends, and acquaintances, including Agostina's mother, raised money to pay Claudio's bail. According to what was reported at the time, the person who had reported him to the authorities was a woman of about 20, also for unlawful deprivation of liberty. According to this girl, she arrived at Claudio's house and shared her location with a friend, which Claudio saw. He asked her who she had shared her location with, took her phone, and started threatening her.
Sacó una pistola. Me hace sentarme en el sillón y me dice que a quién le había pasado mi ubicación y quién sabía de esto. Le dije que nadie y me dice él, a ver, dame mi celular.
She also mentioned that Claudio forced her to undress, tied her hands and feet, and taped her mouth shut. In addition, he gave her an explanation she couldn't understand. He told her that people who needed to trust her were coming to see her for an alleged money exchange, which was quite strange.
Dice que porque las personas que vienen a traer la plata te tienen que ver bien y tienen que confiar en vos.
In the end, the young woman managed to escape because, as she told it, her feet weren't tied properly, and practically naked, she went out and asked neighbors for help. This episode, when Agostina's case came to light, was remembered by local shopkeepers and various witnesses who were in the neighborhood at the time. Returning to Agostina's case, the family, specifically her mother, began receiving anonymous calls. In these anonymous calls, many told them that Agostina was alive, that she was asleep, that she was lying down, not to worry. All this information coming from everywhere with no way to know what was true and what wasn't, ended up taking a toll on the young girl's mother's mental health, and the woman had to be hospitalized after suffering a breakdown. Even so, Agostina's relatives kept demanding justice for her, holding various marches and rallies, asking on social media for the case to be solved and for the girl to be found. And besides that, the police kept moving forward with their investigation. At one point, they hypothesized that it could be financially motivated, but they realized that neither Claudio nor Agostina's family, nor anyone close, had debts that could be interpreted as someone wanting to take the girl as revenge. Thus, the technological forensics continued, and a piece of data emerged that made Claudio's situation even worse. According to information reconstructed by investigators from cell towers, Agostina's phone remained active for 3 hours in the area near the man's home. After that, it stopped emitting a signal completely. Thus, the investigation entered a new phase, and the prosecutor's office ordered a series of simultaneous operations to clarify the facts. One of these new operations was a search of Claudio's home, which this time was completely cordoned off. The procedure was carried out after several neighbors reported seeing strange movements on the property during the early hours of the morning. In parallel, Claudio asked to testify again, and as it turned out in this new questioning, he admitted he had lied and acknowledged that the person in the security cameras was indeed Agostina. Meanwhile, forensics personnel worked inside the house collecting traces and performing various tests. The specialists lifted fingerprints and used luminol to detect any trace of blood that might have been cleaned up. But the search didn't end there. There was a clue that placed Claudio in another part of the city after Agostina's disappearance. so the authorities deployed an operation in a vacant lot located in the south of the city. For more than 7 hours, about 150 officers, along with several trained dogs and horses, combed the area. Amid growing public pressure, the court also decided to partially lift the gag order, giving access to some of the gathered information. Also, several people close to Agostina and others who simply wanted to support the family organized a new demonstration to demand concrete progress in the search. On Saturday, May 30th, another search was conducted at Claudio's house, and besides that, Agostina's father, in an interview with the media, hinted at information that many found controversial. He said, or hinted at the time, that perhaps Claudio's mother, Viviana, was involved in everything that happened. Let's remember that she lived on the same property, so to speak, as Claudio, so it seems strange that the woman wouldn't have noticed if something had happened in the house. Ultimately, to end that day, Claudio's defense attorney ended up resigning. By then, Claudio had contradicted himself too many times, and there seemed to be too many clues against him. But at this point there was one very important thing. Agostina's body had not been found. In the end, it wasn't known if she was alive or dead, but given the days that had passed, many people already assumed that what they were searching for was her body. It was on that day, too, that the young girl's body was found. In a vacant lot, inside a ditch, a body that appeared to be a young woman was found half buried. A few hours later, at a press conference, what everyone feared was confirmed, that the body was indeed Agostina's. And the investigation here changed completely. The case could no longer be classified as unlawful deprivation of liberty, but became a homicide. In addition, it was determined that Agostina's body had remained in Claudio's home until the morning of Monday, May 25th, when he lent his girlfriend his vehicle. It was learned that after this, he drove the vehicle to the southern area of the city, where he dumped the teenager's body. This was discovered thanks to some security cameras that recorded his entry into the sector at 11:45 in the morning on that Monday, and about 30 minutes later, the car was seen again, but leaving the area. Phone triangulation also placed Claudio's phone there during that same period. We also have to make a very important note here, which is that Agostina's body was found in pieces in a plastic barrel and in several trash bags. On the other hand, by that time the police doubted that the crime had been planned. Hours later, the results of the forensic analysis were also released. It was learned that Agostina had died from a mechanical obstruction of the airways. Likewise, the preliminary report detected possible signs of sexual abuse, although it was stated that further studies would be necessary to confirm this hypothesis. By that time, the news had already made a national impact, followed by hours of shock, anguish, and non-stop activity on social media. The case began to occupy all the country's headlines, and rumors, doubts, and new revelations began to circulate. Among them, it emerged that Agostina had not attended school for about 3 weeks, and accusations, speculation, and demands for the investigation to move forward also began to grow. Because by this point, on social media and also in the news, attention was being focused on Agostina's life rather than on Claudio and why he had done this horrible thing. People started talking about the videos she posted on social media, the photos she published, whether she was sexually active or not, and many aspects of her life began to be judged. For many people, this was re-victimizing because it took the focus off the criminal, Claudio, who in the end was an adult who had gained the trust of a minor. Besides that, people also started saying they supposedly had a relationship, something Agostina obviously couldn't consent to due to her age. And on top of that, people also started saying that maybe Agostina's mother knew about all of this. Really, in the end, as I said, this took a lot of attention away from the investigation and what really needed to be discussed. Claudio, the fact that he already had prior complaints, and how this man had taken advantage of his relationship with Agostina and her family. In addition to that, searches continued, and at this point, a very shocking moment took place in the media. And that is because a search was conducted at the home of Claudio's mother. I repeat, they lived on the same property, not in the same household, but on the same property. During that search, the woman came out to speak to the cameras. She came out crying, screaming, and begging for forgiveness for what her son had done.
Es un monstruo, desgraciadamente es un monstruo, se ha hecho todo lo que ha hecho.
In the midst of all this, another story also came to light, and that is that at Claudio's house, a dog was found in a critical state of malnutrition. The animal was rescued by various volunteers, and according to the images released, the dog was weakened and affected by the lack of basic care. The rescuers decided to pay tribute to Agostina and named the dog Agosto. The volunteers reported that the animal showed signs of stress and fear upon arrival. They said he growled and tried to bite other dogs. However, they pointed out that the behavior was understandable due to the trauma he had. And far from settling down, the case continued to add new revelations as the days went by. Among the most shocking was an audio attributed to Claudio that began to circulate publicly. In the recording, he tried to defend himself against the accusations and showed himself once again as a victim of police action and the questioning from Agostina's family. He even claimed that from the beginning of the disappearance, he had been very cooperative.
Yo ya hablé con Mel y le había explicado todo el tema. Fui y declaré, vinieron, me llenaron a mi casa, llenaron a la casa de mi vieja, y ahora sale la madre de la Mel a echarme de esa forma. No tengo nada que ver, al contrario, yo también estoy dando una mano, estoy ayudando en todo lo que más puedo.
In addition to this, as the news became more widely known, many women came forward to speak about the abuse Claudio had committed against them. In the end, it was clear that they were dealing with a serial abuser of women, a person who repeated these patterns over and over again. Claudio's mother, for her part, continued to give various interviews and said that on the night of the events there were many people at the house because there had been a family celebration, and that it was surely because of that celebration, and since the place was so big, they hadn't been able to hear screams or any fight. In addition to this, Claudio's official partner at the time, this woman named Soledad, said that although she had lent him the vehicle, she didn't really know what it was for. Claudio told her it was to take medicine to an uncle who was supposedly sick. So both women completely distanced themselves from the investigation or from having any link to the events that had occurred inside the house. To all of this were also added new versions of Claudio's personal life, as it emerged that he maintained romantic relationships with different women, many of whom claimed to be unaware of the existence of the others. That same night, Gabriel Agostina's father and his lawyers held an extensive press conference. There they insisted that they believed more people were involved. Specifically, the focus was on Soledad, Claudio's partner. As explained by the lawyer for Agostina's father, there were sufficient elements to analyze an indictment for accessory after the fact. And she assured that they would request the justice system to move forward on this procedural situation. In addition, they asked for Claudio's daughter to be interviewed using a Gesell chamber, a special judicial procedure used to take testimony from minors, since they believed the girl could provide relevant information. In addition to that, they also said that for them, Melissa, Agostina's mother, already knew that the teenager had gone with him, because she even pointed to a man supposedly named Franco as a suspect, but never mentioned Claudio during the first few hours. The version backed by the prosecutors immediately generated controversy, as it seemed to contradict some testimonies incorporated into the case file, where Claudio's name supposedly did appear from very early stages of the investigation, but it was determined that all of this had been after the taxi driver's statement and not before. Meanwhile, the authorities also held a press conference where they rejected accusations regarding the delay in the progress of the case against Claudio. By the time we are recording this video, early May 2026, only a few days after Agostina's body was found and the whole case was made public, Claudio remains in prison. He will be charged with the crime of femicide, and they are also looking into whether there are other people involved. To this day, there are still no other people implicated in the case. He is the only person detained and will be the only person charged up to this point. Here, we can already talk about a case of murder, of a man who took advantage of the trust he had with Agostina and who decided for one reason or another to take her life. It is still not known exactly what happened inside that house, and the thing is, only two people know, Agostina, who is no longer here to defend herself and give her version of the events, and Claudio, who refuses to speak, who has changed his story 3 or 4 times now, and who simply gives information, changes information as well the investigations progress, and as he thinks it might benefit him. But by this point, it is known that he is a compulsive liar, he is a serial rapist, he has abused many women, he is not a person who should be in society because he is a danger to everyone, but in the end it will have to be justice that determines how many years he will spend behind bars. And although, as I always tell you, there are new updates in all of this, I will bring them to you on this channel. And well, guys and girls, that's it for today's video. Despite being a recent case, it's a case that has a lot of information, as you will see by the length of the video. Really, well, there is a very big debate here, and it is how far society has gone, or how far people have gone judging the victim, who is Agostina, a girl of just 14, versus how Claudio, who is the person who took her life, should be judged. There have been, well, many comments more in the media than on social media, in traditional media. Many reporters have made comments, as I already told you in the video, about Agostina's life, how she behaved, what photos she uploaded, what videos she uploaded. In the end, we have to be clear about one thing, none of that matters. No one should have their life taken because of that. In the end, the important thing here is that Claudio is a man who already had this tendency to abuse women, to be violent with women, and on top of that, he had many romantic partners. Really, he was a very messy person, or is a very messy person, and he is also a person who is a danger, because he has already, well, been violent with other people. This is the most important thing about this case. This was a man who already had a complaint against him, who in one way or another has always made people feel pity for him, and think that he does nothing wrong. They even went so far as to help him with bail in one of these cases. So it is very important that we reflect more on this. This is a person who should have already been out of prison after having attacked. And not just attacked, he tied up a woman, held her captive in his house, had her tied up there hand and foot, and if that woman hadn't escaped because he didn't tie her feet properly, we don't know what he would have done to her. Is someone who does something like that a person who should be in society? Did a teenager have to die for this person to finally be behind bars for the rest of his days when he already should have been? I think that's what we have to think about, I think that's what we have to reflect on, and I think that's what we have to judge. How long are these people going to be in society? And I'm not just talking about men, I'm talking about women too, who often commit 1, 2, 3 crimes, and then it's not until something bad happens that they are in prison forever. But does a person have to die for these monsters in society to be in prison? It shouldn't be that way. From the moment we see repetitive behavior, violent behavior, these people shouldn't be on the streets anymore. So I think it's important that we see that we think about it. Agostina was only 14 years old, and in the end, this person decided to take her life. If you found this video informative, remember to leave a like, remember to subscribe if you haven't already. I update 3 or 4 times a week, and if you're subscribed, you will get a notification every time I upload a video. Now, see you in another case. Bye.